Hello and welcome to the Short Story Workshop. My name is Mel. I'm here with Matt and Simone. This week we're going to look at a haunted house. Wait, is it the haunted house or a haunted house? I think it's
A, but you put the on the document.
Okay, we're going to look at A Haunted House by Virginia Woolf. Simone, you chose this story. Please, can you introduce us?
So I wanted to read more of Virginia Woolf's work for a while because I always hear that she's very good, but I haven't read very much of her beyond, I think, a room review. And also, I really love a haunted house, so I couldn't really resist this one as a one to read if I was going to read a Virginia Woolf. So I enjoyed it, and I hope you do too.
All right, thank you very much. So here is A Haunted House by Virginia Woolf. Whatever hour you woke, there was a door shutting. From room to room they went, hand in hand, lifting here, opening there, making sure. A ghostly couple. Here we left it, she said, and he added, Oh, but here too. It's upstairs, she murmured, and in the garden, he whispered. Quietly, they said, or we shall wake them. But it wasn't that you woke us. Oh no. They're looking for it. They're drawing the curtain, one might say, and so read on a page or two. Now they found it, one would be certain, stopping the pencil on the margin. And then, tired of reading, one might rise and see for oneself. The house all empty, the door standing open, only the wood pigeons bubbling with content, and the hum of the threshing machine sounding from the farm. What did I come in here for? What did I want to find? My hands were empty. Perhaps it's upstairs then. The apples were in the loft, and so down again, the garden still as ever, only the book had slipped into the grass. But they had found it in the drawing room, not that one could ever see them. The window panes reflected apples, reflected roses, all the leaves were green in the glass. If they moved in the drawing room, the apple only turned its yellow side, yet the moment after, if the door was opened, spread about the floor, hung upon the walls, pendant from the ceiling. What? My hands were empty. The shadow of a thrush crossed the carpet. From the deepest wells of silence, the wood pigeon drew its bubble of sound. Safe, 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 the pulse of the house beat softly. The treasure buried, the room. The pulse stopped short. Oh, was that the buried treasure? A moment later, the light had faded. Out in the garden, then. But the trees spun darkness for a wandering beam of sun, so fine, so rare, coolly sunk beneath the surface beam I sought, always burnt behind the glass. Death was the glass, death was between us, coming to the woman first, hundreds of years ago, leaving the house, sealing all the windows, the rooms were darkened. He left it, left her, went north, went east, saw the stars turned in the southern sky, sought the house, found it dropped beneath the downs. Safe, 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 the pulse of the house beat gladly. The treasure yours. The wind roars up the avenue. Trees stoop and bend this way and that. Moonbeams splash and spill wildly in the rain. But the beam of the lamp falls straight from the window. The candle burns stiff and still, wandering through the house, opening the windows, whispering not to wake us. The ghostly couple seek their joy. Here we slept, she says, and he adds, kisses without number. Waking in the morning, silver between the trees. Upstairs, in the garden, when summer came, in winter snow-time. The doors go shutting far in the distance, gently knocking like the pulse of a heart. Nearer they come, cease at the doorway, the wind falls, the rain slides silver down the glass. Our eyes darken, we hear no steps beside us, we see no lady spread her ghostly cloak. His hands shield the lantern. Look, he breathed, sound asleep, love upon their lips. Stooping, holding their silver lamp above us, long they look and deeply, long they pause. The wind drives straightly, the flame stoops slightly. Wild beams of moonlight cross both floor and wall, and meeting, stain the faces bent, the faces pondering, the faces that search the sleepers and seek their hidden joy. Safe, 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 the heart of the house beats proudly. Stooping, holding their silver lamp above us, long they look and deeply, long they pause. The wind drives straightly, the flame stoops slightly. Wild beams of moonlight cross both floor and wall, and, meeting, stain the faces bent, the faces pondering, the faces that search the sleepers and seek their hidden joy. Safe, 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 the heart of the house beats proudly. Long years, he sighs. Again you found me. Here, she murmurs, sleeping in the garden, reading, laughing, rolling apples in the loft. Here we left our treasure. Stooping, their light lifts the lid upon my eyes. Safe, 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 the pulse of the house beats wildly. Waking, I cry, oh, is this your buried treasure, the light in the heart?
I love that when you say A Haunted House by Virginia Woolf, it makes it sound like she's made a house.
Okay, I will, I guess, give some impressions that I had on the story. I liked it. It's very romantic and sweet. I found it confusing to read, is the only downside, but I think it's done purposefully.
Yeah.
So I just read it again, and then it made more sense. What did you think about it, Matt?
Strange, confusing is perhaps a good way to put it, but I don't dislike it. I can see why it is written in such a strange way, I think because it's trying to incorporate how not normal these things' way of communicating is. It's supposed to be kind of dreamlike, right? So yeah, it's well written. I like it. Quite short. I would have preferred something more concrete, but that's not to say it's bad. It's just my preference.
Yeah, she's a modernist, isn't she? So her writing style is meant to kind of challenge what we think of writing.
So what's a modernist?
So literary modernism has its origins in the late 19th to early 20th centuries, mostly in Europe and Northish America. And the idea is that it's kind of trying to challenge the traditional way we have of writing and use it more to be in a kind of aesthetic way, as opposed to necessarily trying to use it as a vehicle for ideas within the story itself. It's more about the act of writing and like experimenting with writing. So a lot of like modernist writers are like T.S. Eliot, William Faulkner, Ezra Pound.
So it's about writers who are very conscious that they're writing.
Yes, it's all about the experimentation of writing.
They do weird things with form and perspective and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I personally tend to hate a lot of the modernists, I will admit, but I feel like I should give them a chance occasionally, every so often, just to see if I've changed my mind.
I certainly have never read really anything like this story. No, I lied. It reminds me of the fanfics I used to write when I was very, very much younger in some ways, because it's raw emotion. Someone's just gone black at the page. I know that having looked at it a bit more, I know that that's not the case, and this has been very carefully put together. But when I first read it, that's kind of the feeling it gave me.
Wow, you're like, oh, this is just word vomit.
Isn't that kind of what we want from a lot of writing, though? We want it to feel very emotional and immediate and easy, as if the person hasn't really tried, almost to mask the amount of craft that goes behind writing.
No. Disagree.
Fair. I know. I think a lot of people either try to emphasize writing as a craft or hide the fact that it's a craft.
I don't know. I think you can be free to experiment while still acknowledging that writing is a form of communication, and obviously communicating effectively usually means being at least somewhat intuitive rather than just kind of being like, maybe they'll figure out what this means. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they really cared about being understood necessarily. It was more about what you could do.
I think now there's a lot of emphasis on writing for audiences and writing to be clear and succinct, which this text and I'm sure many of the other modernist ones don't really care about.
It's more about description and getting a particular mood out of it.
Is this a short story? To me, it's short, and the way it's written with such a distinct rhythm, it feels way more like it's a cross between a story and a poem, or maybe it's just straight up a prose poem. I don't know. I haven't really read any prose poems, but I honestly read this and was like, is it a story though? I mean, I guess it is in the sense that there's a narrative, but what did you both think about that?
It's written poetically, but it is short and it's a story. I mean, where do you draw the line, right? It's not a hard barrier.
It's closer to perhaps how we'd describe flash fiction, maybe, because it's so short, but it's still within the remit of a short story in terms of word count.
Yeah, okay, so the word count's alright. I did forget flash fiction was a thing for a second, but the style of it doesn't feel like a story to me. Is it just me?
It's just because the style is different to what you usually read.
Mm.
And that doesn't make it less of a story, right?
It still has the components you'd expect in the story. So it has a setting, it has characters. The characters do have a motivation, and there's some element of a plot. Admittedly, maybe not a very drawn-out one, but certainly there is one there. And there's dialogue and various uses. It's not just words tied together without any meaning.
Yeah, I do recognise there's a narrative. I guess it's not what I'm used to. Maybe that's it.
No, I'm sure Virginia Woolf would be thrilled to hear that it wasn't what you were used to. Yes, I succeeded.
So my second question then, which kind of ties into the way that it's written, or is it just me, or is the point of view really confusing? I had to really think about whose point of view the story was from, because of the way it switches between the dialogue and all the back and forth.
Mm.
Did you feel that, or were you just immediately like, oh no, I know exactly what's going on here?
I didn't really think about point of view that much. It is kind of strange. It seems to be kind of third person, but then it has second person in there in some random points.
And I as well. She just used all the persons.
Is there an I outside
I
of
thought there
dialogue?
was an I.
No, you're right. There is an I right there in the middle.
Okay.
So you're right. It just changes randomly.
So, from what I gather, it's the she pronouns are the ghost, the she and he are the ghosts, and the I and we are the person who's narrating.
There's a person?
Yeah.
Isn't it about another couple?
Yeah, it's about another couple talking about this ghostly couple in their house.
There's two couples?
Yeah, that's why one is she and he, and one is I and we.
Okay, I had no idea.
What did you think the story was about?
I thought it was about two people who were ghosts reminiscing about the house they used to live in.
Mel, what did you think the story was about?
I thought it was about a couple who were living in a haunted house and trying to figure out what they were looking for.
Yes, that's what I got as well.
Okay, maybe I'm just strange.
No, but maybe what if they are all the same people? That's really confusing. I think it's just blown my mind. Okay, I'm not sure, but I thought it was about. I thought there were 4 people in the story, a couple that were alive in the present day, and then 2 ghost people who were running around the house and slamming doors or looking for apples or whatever they were doing. So, do you think the point of view is deliberately confusing?
I think so, yes.
I guess this is where I struggle, because as a writer, I want to be understood. Just there, like, why would you not make it clear?
That's why I didn't get on with modernism quite often. Like, I appreciate what they're doing, but it also conflicts with what I, as a writer or as a reader, want out of a story. But I did enjoy this one, because I felt it was a bit more accessible than some of the modernist stuff.
Yeah, it's not inaccessible. Like, I didn't read it and go, well, that was a load of nonsense. I was intrigued enough by it to try and untangle it all in my mind and figure out what was going on in it. I thought the first part, where they were talking about not being able to sleep because of the doors banging, was a really good way to get started and build up the intrigue. Thoughts on the confusing POV, Matt?
I'm just still trying to figure out how the heck there are 4 people in this story.
Okay.
Yeah, like, so there's whatever hour you woke, there was a door shutting. So it's like, it's the narrator talking and relating their experience. From room to room, they went hand in hand, lifting here, opening there, making sure a ghostly couple. So that's the 2 ghosts.
I mean, I see why I'm confused. It's because I thought that the narrator was just a narrator, not an actual person.
Yeah, no, I think they're a person within the narrative.
Yeah, I thought the same. I think it was the ending that kind of put that in my mind, because it talks about someone waking up after having the couple, like, I guess, by their bed, which would be a bit creepy. I like the dialogue in this story. I think it really captures the feeling of creepiness and ghostiness well in its eerie repetition and sort of very short, blunt rhythm back and forth. Why do you think that it's written like that?
Didn't you just answer your own?
Sorry, I've just answered my own question.
Not a bad thing.
Apparently between writing the question and thinking about it, I came up with an answer, so that's good.
I really like this one just because I think a lot of haunted house stories are, as you say, they're very creepy, they're meant to be horrific, they're meant to scare. And while there's an element, I guess, of tension in this one, because we don't know what the ghosts are looking for, there's always something quite endearing about them. Like, they're not out to terrify, they're just kind of looking. And the ending, I think, is quite sweet.
They're quite childish in some ways.
Yeah, it's a nice subversion of the haunted house trait where the haunting isn't supposed to be some horrifying thing. It's kind of healing in a way.
I was actually quite surprised because I thought it was going to be like a bit more like maybe the Telltale Heart or something. You would have this sort of creepiness to it because of the title, and then it was like, no, this is just a nice story about some ghosts who used to love each other, or do love each other. So the ghosts spend a lot of the story looking for something. What did you think they were looking for before, I guess, the line at the end where she says it's the light in the house, I think?
I mean, it says the treasure is the light in the heart, right? And they're always talking about how they feel like something's there, but then it's not. And I thought that was kind of like when somebody dies and you are reminded of them whenever you're around the house, right? Because you see little things, you're like, oh, this reminds me of this person. So I thought it was all like a metaphor for love, and they were trying to find love, which is the light in the heart.
I got that. But the way I got that was that I think the two ghostly couples are looking for each other. And they can't find each other, which is why they're still ghosts. Because they're still trying to desperately find each other. And then at the end, they find this other couple. And it kind of lets them find each other through the love and kind of be in peace and go in peace to the next realm. Because they're finally reunited is kind of how I read the story.
I thought that, but then earlier in the story, it felt like the ghosts were talking to each other, so I was confused. I was like, are they together or are they not together? Can they hear each other but they can't find each other? What the heck is going on here?
Yeah.
Okay, the light in the heart thing makes sense now. I was just like, I don't know what this means. I thought they were looking for something terrifying, like maybe they'd hidden an eldritch abomination under the floorboard somewhere, or some sort of monster eggs. I don't know where my mind was going.
That would have been my kind of story.
Yeah.
Maybe I've read too many of your stories, and now it's just the expectation is that every story is like one of your stories.
God, I don't even know what that means.
Godzilla hiding in the floorboards. So in the story, the emphasis is on the emotion rather than the plot and the characters, which I think is why earlier I was questioning if it was a short story, because even though there are like characters and a plot and that kind of thing, they're very like, there's not very much to them. I mean, I don't know what these characters look like or really anything about them. It seems to be more about the emotion of them not being able to find something, even though they're looking so hard for it.
I would agree. But then I think to a certain extent, when your story is that short, it almost works to link it on the emotion, because the emotion is what people can universally relate to regardless of who your character is. Like, you can get away with not describing them characters so long as the emotion that they are feeling is real. And
so you think emotion is enough to, I guess, drive a satisfying story?
I think so, yes. Like, obviously other elements like detailed characters, particularly with a longer story, would make it stronger, and plot and world building obviously all link in, because, for example, plot often drives emotion or emotion often drives plot and vice versa, so they're not completely unlinked. But I'd much rather have a story that's entirely emotional focused than a story that lacks emotion.
I mean, all my favourite stories have got like a good degree of emotion in them. I'm just not used to it being like this, where it's just emotion, basically. Yeah. It's really strongly a lot of emotions.
Well, it's the idea of the evocative mood, isn't it? Like, it's trying to get the setting of this place for better or worse, rather than focusing on other things. I guess it's almost dreamlike in a way. It focuses so much on like the emotion you have, and then you wake up and you're like, I remember what I felt, but nothing else.
I was thinking about this line about her waking up, and I was like, wait, was this whole story just a dream? Did Virginia Woolf pull it was just a dream for her story ending? You know, the thing they tell you not to do in every writing class, basically.
They do, but that's, like, for example, Inception is entirely hinging on the is this all a dream / is this all a dream? But it's not a bad story, because what happens in the dream has consequences. The reason that this is just a dream ending doesn't work is because what happens in the dream doesn't matter and doesn't change anything.
Okay, so in the story, because the emotion changes, then
it wouldn't really matter if it was a dream if it still had lasting consequence. like, this was all a dream is annoying when you think you've kind of invested in all of their hardships and you've gone through it all with them and you think they've changed as a person, and then you wake up and everything is undone. It's frustrating. And it feels like all the stakes that were built up suddenly were a bit, like, useless. The difference being, of course, if you can die in the dream or if the dream changes something in your actual life.
If I could die in dreams, I'd be really, really dead. I seem to die a lot in dreams. I fall off a lot of things. Once I drove my car out of a skyscraper. That was fun.
Why'd you do that?
I don't know. I wish I knew what this dream meant.
It resembles your desire to quit your job as soon as possible.
Yeah, maybe. What would you do then if you were in this story and it was your house that was haunted?
Well, the ghosts seem quite nice, so you probably just invite them over for tea. I mean, they're already there. You shouldn't need to invite them. You just give them tea.
Maybe some apples. They seem to like apples.
They do.
Yeah, I don't really get that.
Horror as a healing genre is something that really fascinates me. I think it's the idea of these terrible things, but the terrible things often resent something really bad that happens, and like horror often leans into the fact that, you know, you will never recover that, or at least, you know, the protagonist escapes from whatever's reflecting terrible horror. But I've seen a few horror short stories or ideas recently where it's more about the healing power of horror and like engaging with these terrible things and making them better because they can finally kind of rest, like a haunted house being properly looked after so it's no longer shabby, and suddenly the haunting becomes something a lot more kind.
It's like uplifting horror.
Yeah.
Like positive. I don't know. It needs a more catchy name.
Yeah, but I love the juxtaposition of it.
I don't know if I would mind friendly ghosts as much, but I'd still be quite, this is my house, please leave.
Yes. How do I know you're not watching me? Like,
True.
when I'm randomly doing stuff? Don't want to be stared at without someone knowing this.
Also, like, if these are very old ghosts, I imagine I'd have to try and explain what, like, a PlayStation is, and I think it would take a lot of time and effort on my part.
Either that or it would just delight
Maybe it would delight them.
I am shaped by one of the, my seminal, one of the stories I read as a kid that had a lot of impact on me was the Mediator series by Meg Cabot, which had a ghost love interest. So ever since then I've been fascinated by ghosts.
I love that series. I've read it so many times. All the books on my shelf look faded now. Okay, any further thoughts about this story? I feel like, I don't know, I didn't really know what to make of it, which perhaps reflected in my questions.
Do we think it's good or bad to come away with a story and not know what to make of it, or is that just the way some things be?
I guess it's a bit like life, just some things be that way, and your choice is either to go, I don't like it because I don't understand it, or I don't understand it, but that doesn't mean it's bad, or I like it because it made me think about things. Maybe that's a very restrictive way of looking at it, but when I come across something that I don't understand, that's kind of the way my brain seems to go. One of those three ways.
I think the less concrete your story is, the more subjective it becomes. And that means you're taking a risk, and for some people it's probably going to work out pretty well. But for some reason this one didn't quite click with me.
Do you have any thoughts on why it might not have? Is it just that you needed some more details, or?
The fact that it's less concrete makes it more subjective. So if you're writing from your emotions, if you're the kind of person who feels those emotions, you're going to be like, yeah, this story gets me. If you aren't, or you're like less resonant with that kind of feeling, then it just doesn't quite work.
So how would you both rewrite the story if you could?
That's a hard question, because if I rewrote it, it would not resemble what it looks like now. It would lose its uniqueness, I guess, in that it wouldn't be in the form it's in. It would be like a more, I guess, generic, oh god, the house is haunted, whatever shall I do? And then the ghosts are here again, looking for apples or knocking around in the garden. And then, oh my god, the ghosts are at the end of my bed, this is it, I'm definitely gonna die. Maybe it would be more focused on a protagonist then, based on what I've said, but I don't think it would be as powerful, or maybe that's not what I mean. I don't know. Basically, I would just turn it into a more generic story, and I don't know if that would be a good thing to do.
Interesting.
What would you do with it?
Probably would have leaned harder into describing the setting and the characters watching the ghost to try and kind of lean into it and have more of the relationship between the two couples to kind of, I guess, highlight the absence between the two ghostly couples, and then that makes it happier when they reunite at the end. It's probably where I'd go. But again, that would change the story, but we all change stories when we adapt them.
Gosh, adapting this would be a challenge. Whatever you did, someone would probably be like, no, that's wrong, you haven't understood the story at all.
You've ruined Virginia Woolf. Now I'm tempted to do it, even if I ruin it.
Matt, did you have any thoughts about rewriting the story?
I kind of just agree with you. I don't think I could rewrite the story. If I did write it, it would be a different story.
That's the case with any rewrite, isn't it?
I mean, I suppose.
Like, to rewrite a story is to inherently change it.
But I think what I'm saying is that if I was to write a story that was kind of inspired by this one and was a reimagining of it, it would become so different so as to be unrecognizable.
Okie dokie. I think that's the end of the questions. So I guess I have a few bits and pieces about Virginia Woolf, but I don't know ever so much about her. Simone, you might want to chip in if you know a bit more, maybe. So just from doing some quick reading, I found out that she spent most of her life in London. She was influenced by Russian literature. She ran her own publishing house, Hogarth Press, and they translated and printed a lot of Russian literature as well as her own work, including A Room of One's Own, which is a very famous feminist essay. I haven't actually read it, but I mean, it's quoted. It's quoted all the time. So, did you enjoy it? Is it worth reading?
One of the points it makes is how many female writers are shaped by the fact that they don't have their own space to go out and writing. They're always expected to be either within society or busy within the household taking care of kids or taking care of chores, and that affects the way that they write because it shapes obviously the space they write in, the time they have to write. If you're constantly picking it up and putting it back down again versus, say, for example, a male writer who had the option to retreat to his study and work on his writing. If you don't have your own space to write, how does that impact? That's kind of the point of it and the question it was asking.
Yeah, I think I vaguely got that from somewhere, and hence the title, I suppose.
It's a very short and interesting read, I think, regardless of if you end up agreeing with it or not.
She also had, I think, the view that a lot of women who were vilified for being witches or no good sorcerers in the past were probably creative like she was, which was an interesting thought. I guess she thought if she'd lived so that many years ago, she would be thought of as a witch. I like this quote about her, which was made in the Sydney Morning Herald by James Antonio. I don't know how you say his name. Woolf made a virtue of the semicolon, the shape and function of which resembles the wave, her most famous motif. I just like that she was considered famous for using a semicolon, like that was her trademark punctuation.
How the stakes have upped since then. You can never just get away with claiming a piece of punctuation these days.
Exactly. Although I think, was it Naomi Novik, Matt, who had a good old try on the semicolon?
Every time I see a semicolon, it makes me think of Temeraire.
Girls do use a lot of them. I enjoy her, but girls.
I quite like it.
I like her writing a lot, but when Matt pointed it out, I could not unsee it. I was like, oh, I see what he means now. The other half of the quote comes from the fact that she wrote a lot about the sea, which is something I'm also very interested in. So I might have to go check out one of her novels, which was based around a lighthouse from where she used to holiday in either Devon or Cornwall, one of those. So,
just to check, Mel, were you aware she has very famously had a relationship with Vita Sackville West, and her love letters with Vita are considered some of the best?
No. What?
Obviously, she was married and had a husband, but also she had this very, very gay affair. I think was an adaptation on Netflix as well, fairly recently. But yeah, no, Virginia Woolf and Vita Sackville West were quite famous. I'll see if I can find you some choice quotes. I can kind of remember what my favourite one is, but I feel like I would ruin it if I didn't look it up. Yes, so one of the famous ones is, I'm reduced to a thing that wants Virginia. This is Vita 2. Virginia, I composed a beautiful letter to you in the sleepless nightmare hours of the night, and it has all gone. I just miss you in a quite simple, desperate human way.
Oh,
Yeah. Yes, I do like you. I'm afraid to write the stronger word. Virginia to Vita. I shall now have my little treat of writing to Vita, I say to myself.
wow, okay, I'm learning things I did not know that.
Yeah, I thought you'd enjoy.
I very much enjoy. It makes me happy to know that there was some love in her life, because she had a hard time with mental illness. She struggled quite a lot, and sadly she ended her life by committing suicide, and she left a suicide note which I found quite heartbreaking to read to her husband. So yeah, I'm glad that she was able to have some good times writing letters to Vita as well.
Yeah, for the aspiration writer, she was also rejected from most of her work that she tried to publish. She ended up publishing it through her own publishing house, which is interesting when you consider the weight she has.
I did find it really interesting that she and her husband set up their own press, and that she printed some stories by like E.M. Forster, T.S. Eliot, also printed, she self-published herself, which, yeah, a lot of people seem to have this attitude that self-publishing is maybe not so good, but a lot of people do start that way.
There are pros and cons to both traditional and self-publishing, particularly these days. I think as the traditional publishing world gets more competitive or focuses more on sales to, for example, compete with the indie market or Amazon, I think that indie publishing does open the way for a lot of stories that wouldn't otherwise be considered but would still have value, perhaps more nichely or just not in a very easily sellable way. So the problem with, like, for example, market segmentation is everything has to very clearly fit into, it's a romance, it's a horror, it's a whatever. But a lot of stories that we want to tell aren't that clearly delineated. It doesn't fit into one shelf in the bookstore.
I don't know where you would put Virginia Woolf in a bookstore, let's be honest. Well, if it were me, I'd probably be like hovering between the poetry and the fiction section going, I don't know where this goes. Any closing thoughts on anything?
We need more stories about haunted houses, always. I love them.
Okay.
Even when I don't love the story, I love haunted houses.
I'll bear that in mind when I'm looking for future stories. Thank you for listening. You can find all our previous short stories and episodes on our website at www.theshortstoryworkshop.com. If you'd like to contact us, you can do so on Twitter. I am at Figaholic. Matt is
at Matt B. Writer.
And Simone is
T_M_typewriter, also known as the Modern Typewriter.
We'll be back with another story next week. Goodbye.